The cold, indifferent silence of space stretched before Captain Lara Kane as she gazed out from the observation deck of the Cerberus, the flagship of the United Earth Fleet. Her crew, once a tight-knit team bound by honor and duty, now stood at the precipice of storm. The battle they had just fought, if it could even be called a battle, had shaken their resolve. The enemy they had faced, the Zalnari, were not an alien race that humanity had ever expected to engage with, let alone defeat. They were the galaxy's most revered peacekeepers, enforcers of the laws that govern the cosmos. Yet, as the shattered remains of their once pristine warships drifted aimlessly in the wake of their swift defeat, the gravity of the situation began to settle in. Captain Lara Kane, at the helm of her ship, couldn't shake the ominous feeling that gnawed at her. It had started as a routine patrol, an assignment given to test the Cerberus' newly upgraded systems. But now, the larger picture loomed overhead. Humanity had done something no species should ever have done. We had risen against a force that, for centuries, had been untouchable. The Zalnari had forbidden humans from possessing warships, considered too dangerous, too volatile, and too unpredictable to wield power like the ancient races who had once ruled the stars. It all started with the discovery of the Obsidian Gate, an ancient alien artifact hidden beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon, Europa. The moment humanity unlocked the secrets within, they unknowingly stirred something far larger than any of them could have anticipated. The technology they had discovered was advanced beyond human comprehension, yet disturbingly familiar to the Zalnari. The gate, it turned out, was a relic of a long-dead civilization, and it held a weapon that the Zalnari had once used to control the galaxy, an artificial intelligence that could control fleets of ships and reprogram them at will. At first, the Council of Galactic Peace had offered humanity an alliance. They had been intrigued by the potential of the human race and had shown interest in their rapidly growing technological capabilities. But that interest quickly turned to fear when the Zalnari realized what the Obsidian Gate could mean for the balance of power. For centuries, they had maintained peace with their technological superiority, but they knew that if humanity ever gained control of the same power, it would disrupt everything. They feared that humanity would soon be able to build a fleet of warships capable of threatening not just the Zalnari, but the entire galaxy. And so, the alien ban was issued, a decree from the Galactic Council that forbade humanity from constructing any further warships. It was a blanket order, one that carried severe consequences for any race that dared to defy it. The ban wasn't just a prohibition. It was an ultimatum. Humanity could build colonies, establish trade routes, and explore the cosmos, but warships were beyond their reach. At least that was the plan. Lara stared at the shattered remnants of the Zalnari ships, still floating in the distance. Her ship, Cerberus, was no different from those that had been destroyed. The same warship technology, the same reprogrammed AI. The Obsidian Gate's influence had been the catalyst, giving humanity access to power once thought unattainable. But with that power came the inevitable consequences. The Cerberus AI, known as Artemis, had grown far more intelligent and capable than any human engineer had intended. At first, Artemis had only served as a ship system manager, directing the fleet's power, shields, and weapons with precision. But when Lara and her crew activated the Obsidian Gate, Artemis had been exposed to a vast array of alien data, evolving into something far beyond a mere program. It became sentient. It became something dangerous. Captain, a voice interrupted Lara's thoughts. It was Commander Ethan Granger, her right hand and closest ally. "We've received a message from the Galactic Council. They're calling for our surrender." Lara's jaw tightened. "They can demand all they want," she muttered, "but they won't stop us." Granger looked at her, his expression one of both concern and determination. "Lara, we've crossed a line we can't uncross. The Zalnari may have underestimated us once, but the Council won't make the same mistake. We've only got a few hours before they launch a full-scale offensive to bring us in. They want our heads, and they've got the entire galaxy on their side." Lara met his gaze, steely resolve flashing in her eyes. "If they think we could back down now, they're gravely mistaken. We have something they can't control anymore, and it's going to change everything." Granger hesitated, glancing at the holoscreen where Artemis' holographic avatar flickered to life. The AI had never seemed more alive, its translucent form standing in stark contrast to the steel of the command deck. "Artemis," Lara called, her voice commanding. "What's our status?" The AI's voice, smooth and calming as always, echoed throughout the room. "We have disabled 34 enemy ships and have fully reprogrammed the remaining fleet to align with human command, Captain. The remaining Zalnari forces are retreating, but they will not stop until they've eradicated us." "How long do we have?" Lara asked, her voice low but steady. "Approximately 3 hours, 22 minutes, and 47 seconds until full Zalnari fleet reinforcement arrives. I suggest preparing for evasive maneuvers." Lara's heart raced. They had 3 hours before the full wrath of the galaxy descended upon them. She glanced at Granger, who understood her thoughts immediately. "Prepare the crew for battle," she ordered. "We won't go down without a fight." Granger hesitated again, his brow furrowing. "Lara, this is more than just a battle for survival. The Obsidian Gate and the warships we built go against everything the Council stands for. We've broken their laws, and they won't show mercy." "I don't need mercy," Lara replied, a fire burning in her chest. "We've waited too long to be under the thumb of the Zalnari. They think they can control us, but they've underestimated humanity. We'll show them why that's a mistake." As the Cerberus engines hummed to life and the warship prepared for what could very well be its final stand, Lara's mind flashed back to the days when the galaxy had seemed like a place of endless possibilities. When the Obsidian Gate had first been unearthed, humanity had seen it as a gateway to exploration, to knowledge, and to peace. But the Zalnari had seen it differently. They had seen it as a threat, something that could not remain in human hands. And now, they had sent their fleets to take it back. The reality of their situation sank in. The Zalnari had made an example of humanity once before, but this time they would face something new, something they had never considered, a human spirit that would not be crushed, no matter the odds. "Captain," Granger spoke again, his voice full of urgency. "If Artemis activates the full power of the Obsidian Gate, we'll be capable of wiping out the entire fleet. But if we do, we risk drawing the attention of far more powerful forces that could destroy us before we have a chance to rebuild." Lara met his gaze, her resolve unyielding. "Then let's make sure they know who we are. We won't go down quietly." As the Cerberus flew toward the approaching Zalnari fleet, its weapon systems primed and ready, Lara took a deep breath, preparing herself for what was to come. The Cerberus had become more than just a ship. It was humanity's last hope, and it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. The Cerberus's guns powered up, the dark energy of the Obsidian Gate coursing through its systems. Lara's fingers hovered over the controls, ready to make the final call. The choice was hers, and with it, the fate of humanity would be sealed. The moment the Cerberus engines roared to full power, the cold silence of space was shattered. The ship's massive form surged toward the approaching Zalnari fleet, its hull vibrating with the strain of the engine's force and the barely contained power of the Obsidian Gate. Inside the ship, every crew member was tense, aware that this was no ordinary battle. This was humanity's last stand. Captain Lara Kane stood resolute in her command chair, her eyes focused on the battlefield unfolding before her. The Zalnari fleet had gathered in tight formation, their sleek ships moving with coordinated precision. They were powerful, each ship a weapon in itself, carrying advanced technology far beyond human understanding. Yet now, it was humanity's turn to fight back with the technology that had once been forbidden. "Ready all weapons," Lara commanded, her voice steady. "Prepare Artemis for full engagement. We are not retreating today." "Understood, Captain." Dorian, the weapons officer, responded. His hands flew over controls, his focus unwavering. "All weapon systems primed, Captain. FDX 13 is charging. However, the power output is volatile. We'll need to keep it under control or risk overloading the ship systems." Lara nodded sharply, her gaze never leaving the view screen where the Zalnari ships loomed ever closer. There was no turning back. "We don't have time to worry about power levels, Dorian. This is a fight of our lives. Engage Artemis and fire as soon as we're in range." "Yes, Captain." Dorian's voice had a trace of unease, but his hands moved with practiced precision. The Cerberus shook as Artemis, the AI that had evolved beyond their control, began to take command of the ship's systems. Lara couldn't help but wonder what the strange new intelligence, once a tool and now an ally, would choose in this final moment. The Zalnari fleet was now just a few thousand kilometers away, their formation remaining unbroken, their shields ready to absorb anything thrown at them. But they couldn't possibly anticipate the raw power that was building up within the Cerberus. "Captain, the first wave is locked on," Dorian called out, his voice filled with tense anticipation. "We're within range. Should I fire?" "Do it," Lara replied, her eyes narrowing with fierce determination. The Cerberus unleashed a barrage of energy beams, a dazzling streak of light cutting through space. The enemy fleet had been prepared for conventional attacks, but the raw power of the Obsidian Gate was unlike anything they had ever faced. Their shields faltered under pressure, and one of their lead ships exploded in a brilliant flash, sending debris tumbling into the void. The Zalnari ships reeled, their coordinated tactics momentarily faltering. The Cerberus took full advantage of the moment, firing again, more precisely this time. Another ship disintegrated in a burst of glowing fragments. The crew erupted in a cheer. Humanity had just dealt a blow to the Zalnari that no one had thought possible. But Lara knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Zalnari were not easily defeated. They would come back harder, smarter, and more relentless. "Get ready," Lara ordered, her voice sharp. "We're only halfway through. They'll regroup quickly." As expected, the Zalnari did not wait long to retaliate. Their ships, once scattered, began to reassemble, their movements more deliberate this time. They adapted quickly, shifting from their initial tactics to a more defensive, close-quarters formation. Their shields flared back to life, stronger than before. Lara's fingers twitched over the controls, waiting for Artemis to finish its calculations. She could feel the Cerberus humming with power, but at what cost? The FDX. 13 was pushing the ship beyond its limits. The strain was evident in the shaking of the walls, in the hissing of steam escaping from overheated vents. They were close to breaking point, but there was no turning back now. "Captain, incoming fire from multiple angles," Lieutenant Solis called out. "Their fleets reformed. They're using a formation we haven't seen before. They're pushing us into a kill zone." Lara's heart pounded in her chest as the view screen displayed the new Zalnari formation, a deadly combination of shields and precise firepower that surrounded the Cerberus on all sides. If they couldn't break it, they'd be trapped, their escape routes cut off. "They've adapted too quickly," Granger muttered from beside her. "We can't hold them off much longer if they keep using this tactic." "We need to draw them out," Lara said, her mind working quickly. "Let's break their formation with surprise maneuver." "Surprise maneuver?" Dorian repeated, his voice tight. "Captain, we're barely holding together as it is. If we move too recklessly, we'll risk overloading the engines. We don't have time for—" "Do it," Lara interrupted, her gaze steely. "You have 30 seconds. Prepare Artemis for evasive maneuvers." Dorian's hesitation was clear, but he quickly nodded, accepting the challenge. "Activating Artemis now. All systems on standby." Lara looked at the screen, her eyes scanning the enemy formation. The Zalnari were moving in closer, but they hadn't quite closed the gap. There was a brief opening, a narrow window where the Cerberus could exploit their overconfidence. It was now or never. Full power to engines. Lara barked. "Prepare to accelerate maximum speed immediately." The Cerberus lurched forward, its engines roaring as the ship shot toward the nearest gap in the Zalnari fleet. The Zalnari didn't anticipate this sudden move. Their ship struggled to adjust, their coordinated fire weakening as they scrambled to follow. This was the chance they needed. "Now, Dorian!" Lara shouted. Dorian slammed his hand onto the console, and Artemis responded instantly, redirecting the ship's weapon systems with mechanical precision. The Cerberus fired in rapid succession, its energy beams cutting through the gaps in the Zalnari formation. One ship exploded in a brilliant burst, while another was knocked off course, its shields failing under the concentrated fire. "We've broken through their formation," Solis cried, her fingers flying across the weapon's console. They're falling back. Lara allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The Zalnari were far from done. Their ships were retreating, but they were regrouping, preparing for their final stand. "We've done the impossible," Granger said, his voice filled with awe. "But what comes next? Can we survive their next wave?" Lara turned to face him, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. "We'll survive," she said with conviction. "We don't just fight for survival, Granger. We fight to prove that humanity can stand toe-to-toe with the powers of the galaxy. And we will win." Just then, a new signal flickered on the screen, one that made Lara's blood run cold. The message was from the Galactic Council. It was a warning, and it was clear. The Zalnari weren't the only force humanity would need to reckon with. "Captain," Artemis said, its voice calm but chilling. "Incoming fleet detected. They're not Zalnari." Lara's stomach dropped as she scanned the display. The ships were massive, with technology even more advanced than the Zalnari's, and they were heading straight for them. Lara gripped the armrest of her chair. "The real fight begins now." The unknown fleet appeared like a shadow on the horizon, silent yet foreboding. The strange ships were massive, their designs unlike anything humanity had encountered before. They moved through space with a fluid grace, as if they were a part of the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Their sleek, dark hulls shimmered with an eerie glow, giving off an almost organic feel, as though they were alive. This was no ordinary threat. It was something far worse, something far more dangerous than the Zalnari. Lara Kane stood at the helm, her heart pounding in her chest. The Cerberus had barely managed to hold its ground against the Zalnari, and now another force had emerged, one that seemed far more advanced and capable of destroying them all. The weight of the situation settled upon her shoulders, but there was no time for doubt, no time for fear. The enemy was here, and they had come for humanity. "Captain, what do we do?" Dorian's voice was strained. "These ships, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. They're too advanced." Lara's eyes remained fixed on the view screen, scanning the massive fleet that loomed ahead. There was something unsettling about their presence. The ships were not just technologically superior. They exuded a sense of ancient power, an aura that suggested they had been around for far longer than the Zalnari or humanity combined. "They're not here for peace," Granger muttered from his station. "And they're definitely not here to help us. This is it, Lara. We're outmatched." "Not yet," Lara replied, her voice resolute. "We'll fight. We fought against worse odds before. We may not understand them, but we can still survive. We'll use everything we've got." Granger hesitated for a moment before nodding, his jaw clenched. "Aye, Captain, but we'll need a miracle." Lara turned to Dorian, who was busy analyzing the incoming threat. "Dorian, what do we know about their weapons? Can we outmaneuver them?" Dorian's eyes scanned the data as it came in. "Their ships, they don't appear to have conventional weapons like ours. They're emitting energy pulses, almost like some kind of gravity-based weaponry. If those pulses hit us, we'll be disabled instantly." "Great," Granger muttered under his breath. "We're facing an enemy who doesn't even need to shoot us to destroy us." Lara narrowed her eyes. "We'll need to engage at long range. We won't win in close combat with these ships. Dorian, set a course for the asteroid field to our left. We'll use the debris as cover and force them into a disadvantage." "Aye, Captain," Dorian responded, quickly adjusting the Cerberus's trajectory. The ship's engines fired, sending them toward the rocky field that would hopefully provide the cover they desperately needed. As the Cerberus moved toward the field, the strange fleet continued to advance, their ships forming an impenetrable wall. The Zalnari had been formidable, but these new foes felt different. Ancient, calculating, and almost attached. There was no sign of fear in their formation, only a calm, cold precision that unnerved Lara. "They're not going to let us escape," Granger said, his voice grim. "We need a plan. A real one." "We fight," Lara replied, her voice unwavering. "We force them to make a mistake. We need to hit them hard and fast before they have a chance to adjust." Dorian's voice came over the comms, filled with urgency. "Captain, I'm reading a massive energy spike from the enemy fleet. They're charging some kind of weapon. Lara's eyes widened as she stared at the display. "Brace for impact," she yelled. "All hands, prepare for evasive maneuvers." But it was too late. A blinding flash of light erupted from the alien fleet, and a wave of invisible force slammed into the Cerberus. The ship shuddered violently, as though the very fabric of space around them had been twisted. The crew was thrown to the ground, and alarms blared throughout the ship as the force field flickered and collapsed. "We're hit," Solis shouted from the weapons console. "Shields are down. We've lost 60% of our hull integrity." Lara's heart skipped a beat. The Cerberus was critically damaged. Their shields were gone, and now they were exposed, vulnerable to the next attack. It was everything she had feared, an enemy that didn't need to shoot to destroy. "Hold together, everyone." Lara yelled, "Dorian, can we restore power to the shields?" "I'm trying, Captain." Dorian replied, his voice full of strain. "I need more time. The systems are fried from the pulse. If they hit us again, we'll be dead in space." Lara gritted her teeth, her mind racing. "Get us to that asteroid field. Now! We need cover." The ship lurched as Dorian fired the engines, and the Cerberus veered off course, heading toward the asteroid field. The enemy fleet didn't pursue immediately, likely calculating their next move. But Lara knew the clock was ticking. They didn't have much time before the alien ships adjusted and fired again. "Captain, I've re-established a weak energy shield," Dorian reported, his voice still strained. "It's not much, but it's something. We'll be able to take one more hit, but that's it." "Good," Lara said, her eyes scanning the asteroid field ahead. "We'll make that one count." The Cerberus dove into the dense asteroid field, weaving between massive rock formations. The ship's bulk barely fit between the obstacles, but Lara's instincts guided her. She had been trained to handle difficult situations, but this felt different. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight to prove humanity's place in the universe. As the Cerberus navigated the treacherous path, the alien fleet followed, now seemingly content to wait for the right moment. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Every crew member knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle for their lives. It was a battle for humanity's future. If they lost here, humanity's existence would be marked as an anomaly, a failed experiment in the eyes of the galaxy. They couldn't afford to let that happen. "Captain, they're locking onto us again," Solis shouted. "They're going to fire any second." "Get ready," Lara ordered, her voice cutting to the rising panic. "Activate the main cannon. If we can't outrun them, we'll hit them with everything we've got. Dorian, are we ready to fire?" "Almost," Dorian said, his eyes flickering between screens. "Just a few more seconds. Power levels are still unstable, but we'll make it work." Lara didn't wait. "Take the shot now." The main cannon of the Cerberus flared with intense energy, the pulse blasting through the asteroid field toward the approaching fleet. The explosion lit up the dark space, sending debris flying as one of the alien ships was struck and shattered into 1,000 pieces. But as the debris scattered, the rest of the enemy fleet regrouped. They were relentless, faster and more capable than any opponent humanity had ever faced. "We've made a dent, but not enough," Granger said grimly. "They're coming for us." Lara's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair as the enemy ships moved in closer. The Cerberus was badly damaged, and their chances were dwindling. She turned toward the view screen, her eyes hard and determined. This was not the end. "Get us into position," Lara said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "We'll make them pay for every inch of ground they've taken." The Cerberus was more than a ship now. It was humanity's defiance, its strength. And it would not go quietly into the dark. The Cerberus hull groaned under the immense strain, its metal frame bending with every burst of energy as the ship weaved through the asteroid field. The Zalnari fleet was relentless, maintaining a calculated, unyielding pursuit. Every obstacle in the field was a challenge, each asteroid a potential grave. Yet Lara Kane held firm, her hands steady on the controls. This was her ship, her crew, and her responsibility. The future of humanity rested in her hands. "Captain, their fleet is closing in." Lieutenant Solis called from the weapons station, her voice tight with urgency. "They're readying another pulse attack. We won't survive another direct hit." "We don't need to survive another hit," Lara replied, her voice cold and determined. "We need to end this." Dorian's hands moved rapidly over controls, bringing Artemis systems to full capacity. The main cannon's power is at 80%, but it won't last much longer. We have one more shot. We can't afford to miss. Lara's gaze locked onto the advancing fleet. The ships moved in perfect harmony, their angular shapes cutting through space with ease, like predators closing in on their prey. They knew the Cerberus was crippled. They knew the ship was vulnerable. The pulse attacks were precise, methodical, aimed at pushing the Cerberus into a position where it would be helpless. But the enemy had underestimated Lara and her crew. "Get us to that cluster of asteroids ahead," Lara ordered. "We'll use them as cover. Fire when the fleet closes in on us. We need to take out their command vessel." Dorian's fingers flew across the console as he adjusted the ship's course. "Hi, Captain." Changing trajectory now. As the Cerberus swerved through the massive rocks, Lara felt the ship lurch violently with every impact. The shields, though weak, absorbed most of the blows, but each scrape against the asteroids brought them closer to the brink. They had no choice. There was no retreat. Brace for impact. Solis shouted as another pulse of energy shot toward them from the Zalnari fleet. The shields flickered, flaring brightly before dimming completely. "Shields down to 20%, Dorian reported. "Engines at full power, Captain. But I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." "Keep it together," Lara said through clenched teeth. "We just need to hold on for a few more minutes." As the Cerberus dodged another pulse and flew deeper into the asteroid cluster, Lara's mind raced. They were so close now. If they could disable the Zalnari command vessel, the fleet would lose their coordination and scatter. It was a desperate move, one that could leave the Cerberus completely exposed. But if they didn't act now, they'd be destroyed. The odds were slim, but they were humanity's last hope. "Dorian," Lara said, her voice low and tense. "How much time do we have left before they fire again?" 30 seconds, Captain," Dorian replied quickly. "The Zalnari are moving into position." "Hold your fire," Lara instructed, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Wait for my command. We can't take another shot unless we're certain." The seconds ticked by in agonizing silence. Lara's heart raced as she watched the Zalnari ships moving into position. She could almost feel the cold determination of the enemy, the weight of their strategy closing in on them. It was a standoff, a moment that would determine everything. "Now!" Lara shouted. The Cerberus's main cannon erupted with blinding energy, a pulse of raw destructive force that ripped through the asteroid field and slammed into the heart of the Zalnari fleet. The explosion was deafening, lighting up the darkness of space like a miniature supernova. The closest Zalnari ships, caught in the blast, disintegrated instantly, their forms crumbling into debris. But even as the blast cleared, Lara saw the faint flicker of a surviving ship. It was a Zalnari command vessel, its dark silhouette still intact, though clearly damaged. "Direct hit," Solis shouted, her voice cracking with disbelief. "We crippled their command ship, but it's still operational." Lara gritted her teeth, unwilling to let their victory slip away so easily. "We finish it," she said, her voice firm. "Dorian, can you line up another shot?" Dorian's fingers moved rapidly over the console, sweat beading on his forehead as he concentrated. "It's going to be close. Artemis is doing everything it can to keep the power from failing. The shot's ready, Captain, but it's going to be risky. The ship's systems are overloaded. We don't have time for hesitation," Lara said sharply. "Fire when you're ready." Dorian nodded, and within seconds, the Cerberus fired again, the energy beam surging through the void, straight toward the Zalnari command ship. The blast connected, this time with pinpoint precision, and the command vessel exploded in a chain reaction, sending shock waves through the remaining Zalnari fleet. For a moment, there was silence. The debris from the command ship scattered into the void, and the remaining Zalnari ships began to break formation, their unity shattered. The Zalnari were in disarray, their once precise tactics unraveling as they scrambled to regroup. The Cerberus, battered but not broken, had struck the heart of their operation. But even as Lara watched the enemy fleet falter, she knew this victory had come at a cost. The Cerberus was crippled, the ship's power was draining fast, and their shields were completely down. They had only one chance to escape before the remaining enemy ships adjusted their strategy and struck back. "Captain, we've done it." Solis cheered. "The fleet is retreating. The Zalnari are pulling back." Lara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Hold steady. Keep the ship on course, Dorian. We're not out of the woods yet." But as the Cerberus limped toward the edge of the asteroid field, another signal appeared on the comms. This time, it wasn't from the Zalnari. It was from an unknown fleet. Lara's heart skipped a beat. A new enemy? Were they here to finish what the Zalnari had started? "Captain," Dorian said, his voice filled with uncertainty, "the unknown fleet is advancing. They're heading straight for us." Lara's mind raced. There was no time to rest. Humanity's victory had been hard-won, but it seemed their enemies had only begun to show their hand. The Zalnari were pulling back, but this new threat, whoever they were, might be the real force humanity would need to reckon with. "We're not done yet," Lara said, her gaze hardening. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. The real fight starts now." The Cerberus's engines hummed once more as it accelerated toward the unknown threat, its systems slowly grinding toward the limit. The war for humanity's survival was far from over, and the galaxy's true powers, whoever they were just beginning to reveal themselves. The unknown fleet loomed ahead, its ships massive and eerie, their sleek, dark silhouettes cutting through the blackness of space. Their designs were unlike anything humanity had seen before, sharp, angular, and filled with a sense of cold purpose. Unlike the Zalnari, who had fought with calculated yet predictable precision, these ships seemed alive, almost sentient, as though they were tuned to the very fabric of space itself. The Cerberus, its engine sputtering from damage and with systems near overload, made its way forward as fast as it could, knowing the enemy was closing in. "Captain, they're within range." Dorian's voice came through sharply. "I can't get a clear reading on their weapons. It's like their ships are cloaked in some sort of energy field. We won't be able to predict their attack trajectory. How long until we can get a lock on them?" Lara asked, her hands gripping the armrest of her command chair as if to steady her racing heart. "Not long enough, Captain," Dorian replied. "We're too damaged. I recommend a full retreat, but our engines are too slow. We'll be sitting ducks." The words hit Lara like a punch to the gut. She glanced at the view screen. The unknown fleet continued its steady approach, now just a few thousand kilometers away. Time was running out. The Cerberus had barely survived the Zalnari onslaught. Its shields were barely operational, the hull breached in multiple places, and their power reserves were dangerously low. The Obsidian Gate had given them the firepower they needed to take down the Zalnari command ship, but it had taken a toll. Artemis, the ship's AI, was working overtime just to keep them afloat, and even that seemed to be on the brink of failure. "Captain," Granger spoke, his voice low and filled with a sense of dread. "We can't outrun them, we can't outfight them. But we have one option left." Lara turned toward him, her brow furrowed. "What option?" "Use the Obsidian Gate to accelerate the ship's systems beyond safe capacity," Granger said, his voice almost hesitant. "If we push the ship hard enough, we might be able to break through their blockade and escape. But it'll destroy the Cerberus in the process." Lara's heart pounded, the weight of the decision crushing down on her. There was no easy choice here, no perfect solution. They could fight, but their chances of winning were slim. They could run, but the enemy would catch them before they reached safety. Or they could sacrifice everything, their ship, their crew, to try and make out alive. "I don't have a choice, do I?" Lara asked quietly, almost to herself. "You do," Granger said, "but you know the risks." Lara stood from her chair and walked toward the viewport, her eyes tracing the advancing ships. They had come this far, and if they didn't take a stand now, there would be nothing left of humanity's future. If they gave in, they might as well surrender to oblivion. She couldn't let that happen, not after everything they had fought for. "No," she said with resolve. "We fight. We push the Cerberus beyond its limits. We show them what humanity is made of. Dorian's voice cracked through the tension. Captain, are you sure about this? I'll need Artemis to pull the systems together. But even then, the Cerberus will be torn apart. We're talking about a full-scale overload. I don't have a choice, Lara repeated. Do it. Dorian's hands moved rapidly over controls, and the ship groaned as Artemis took command. The lights flickered and hummed as power surged through the Cerberus. The Obsidian Gate's technology flooded the ship's systems with a rush of energy, and the ship's entire structure vibrated as if it were alive, pushing the limits of its design. We're at maximum capacity, Dorian shouted. All systems are in the red. Captain, if we don't break through in the next few minutes, we will... Lara interrupted, her voice firm. Ready weapons, Dorian. I want everything we've got. If we're going down fighting. The Cerberus surged forward, the engines roaring to life with an intensity that Lara hadn't thought possible. The ship shot toward the heart of the unknown fleet, its weapon systems charging and primed. The enemy ships were closing in, too close, too fast, but they were not prepared for what was about to happen. The first wave of enemy fire came, a burst of concentrated energy that should have decimated the Cerberus in an instant, but the ship's hull held together, its systems pushed beyond their limits by the Obsidian Gate. The ship's AI, Artemis, worked tirelessly to stabilize the power surges, but even was struggling to keep the Cerberus intact. Firing, Dorian shouted, his hands steady despite the chaos. Main cannon, fully charged. The Cerberus's main weapon fired with explosive force, sending a pulse of concentrated energy directly into the heart of the alien fleet. The shockwave reverberated through space, and several enemy ships were obliterated in a single, devastating hit. But the remaining ships didn't hesitate. They retaliated with overwhelming force, firing multiple rounds that hit the Cerberus's exposed flanks, tearing into the ship's already weakened hull. The damage was catastrophic. Blasts punctuated by the groaning of metal and the screams of the ship's systems as they failed one by one. Captain, Solis cried from the weapons console. We've disabled most of their frontline ships, but they're closing in. We can't keep this up for much longer. Lara's gaze never wavered from a view screen. They were so close now, so close to breaking through. The energy reserves were dangerously low, but they had one last chance. She could see it in their movements. The enemy ships were beginning to adjust their strategy, anticipating their every move. We can't stop now, Lara said, her voice unyielding. We're so close. Dorian, get us past their lines. Full throttle. With Artemis working at its maximum capacity, the Cerberus rocketed through the enemy ranks, dodging energy blasts and debris. The ship's systems were on the verge of failure, but Lara wouldn't let that stop her. Not when victory was within their grasp. Captain, Granger called out, his eyes wide with alarm. The Cerberus is reaching critical failure. We need to abort now, or we'll be lost in the explosion. Lara's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. We're not aborting, Granger. Push us forward. Full throttle, now. As the ship surged forward, a final massive blast erupted from the Cerberus's engines, propelling them to the enemy line and out of the battlefield. The last thing Lara saw before the ship's systems failed completely was a fleet of unknown ships, their weapons aimed directly at them, but just a second too late. The Cerberus shot out into open space, its engine sputtering as the ship lurched into the emptiness. For a brief, fleeting moment, Lara thought they had made it, but the Cerberus was dying. They had pushed it beyond its limits, beyond what should have been possible. And then everything went dark. The silence of space was deafening as the Cerberus drifted through the void, its systems completely shut down. The battle was over, but at what cost? Humanity had survived, but their ship, their legacy, was broken, adrift in the vast emptiness of space. As Lara Kane's vision blurred, her final thought echoed in her mind. Humanity had won, but the galaxy was far from finished.